But Pétain's weakness won't stop us from bringing in the harvest. We're a long way from Paris, and hopefully we won't be too affected by the armistice. I'm sure we'll be left alone to get on with our work." He tried to sound matter-of-fact, but Arlette sensed a change in his voice. Despite his apparent disregard for the information, she heard a faltering that hadn't been present before.
"Where's Gilbert?" asked
Francine. It was unspoken knowledge that Francine had become sweet on Arlette's elder brother this past year. "He went inside for bread and goat's cheese," said Henri, loosening his embrace on his daughter. "Go and tell him to hurry up. We won't let the Germans disrupt our lives." Arlette nodded. If her father wanted to pretend that everything was fine, then she would reciprocate. Gilbert didn't move when Arlette walked into the kitchen. He was leaning back in their father's armchair with his feet resting on a stool, chewing the remnants of his sandwich. At 22, he was tall, dark-haired and broad, with muscles developed through hard graft after years working on the farm. As soon as Francine entered, though, he sat up, straightened his hair, and wiped crumbs from his lips. "Hello, Francine." She smiled and lifted a hand in greeting, and stared at her feet. Arlette found this unaccustomed shyness between her brother and her best friend very confusing. How was it possible that despite spending sultry summers and bitter winters together since they were children, they suddenly found it more difficult to communicate despite a growing fondness for each other? "Father says to hurry up," said Arlette. She looked at her brother's dishevelled hair, scattered whiskers and large fern-green eyes, a colour they'd both inherited from their late mother. No, she couldn't tell him of their premier's cowardice. Her own bravery had escaped her for the moment. She watched him get to his feet, smile shyly at Francine before placing his mug in the stone sink and heading back to the barn.
"Do you still have the caterpillars?"
asked Francine. "Of course." Arlette rubbed her hands together, making a shushing sound, as if she were mentally washing away the anxiety that was growing inside her. She forced a smile. "You can help me carry some more leaves upstairs. They need feeding." When they had aprons full of leaves from the mulberry tree that grew a short distance from the kitchen door, Arlette led her friend through the kitchen and sitting room into the hall. The sound of their clogs echoed around the walls as they clomped upstairs and along the corridor. She opened the door facing them, pushing it with her bottom before dropping the leaves on the nearest table. Arlette pointed. "You spread half over those far tables and I'll do these." Francine wrinkled her nose.
"I'd forgotten how smelly they are."
"You get used to it. A cow's smell worse." They scattered the leaves and twigs over the crawling mass of caterpillars, some of which had scaled the lip of the table and fallen onto the floor. Arlette then took a small knife and cut a length of string, tightening a few corners of a wooden framework that sat on top of the tables among the writhing mass of bodies. Francine placed a finger over the string, holding a knot in place while it was tied.
"Are you still selling the cocoons?"
"Yes. I wish I'd learned to spin silk myself. Looking after these little creatures makes me feel as though I'm doing something to help. The more silk produced, the more parachutes are made, and I also make a little money from it."
"I need to find some work that pays, too. Helping on Papa's farm keeps me busy, but I'm an adult now. I'm getting old."
Arlette laughed at her friend's serious expression. 20 isn't old." For a few minutes they spread the leaves evenly between 6 tables without speaking. Then Francine looked up.
"Do you think Gilbert will leave Montvert, like Rennes and Albert?"
Arlette realised that Francine was as anxious as she was since hearing the latest news from Paris. "I don't know, Cece. Your brothers are older, and felt they needed to fight to keep the Germans out of France. Now Pétain has opened the door and invited the enemy inside. Perhaps Rennes and Albert will come back home." Francine sighed.
"We haven't heard from them in so long. I'm scared that everything is changing and that the war will swallow us all up."
Arlette pulled her friend into a hard embrace. "I'm sure everything will be fine," she said, though in her heart she was just as afraid as her friend. Chapter 2. The first Sunday of September 1940 arrived, with the countryside